Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool and special review for you from the brand Raven. A little bit about them. They were founded back in 2008. They're headquartered out of the US, and basically they once upon a time were a microbrand really known for that vintage style homage with modern upgrades. And since then, they've moved towards more unique and original designs, and I think really have set out a very clean design aesthetic for themselves. As a real main kind of mainstream micro brand. So really glad to see their success since I originally reviewed their Trekker many years ago on the channel. Now, of course, this particular type of watch, if you cannot tell just by looking at this bad boy, is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language when you're looking for a dive watch. Of course, you're going to want water resistance. Typically, with some type of screw down crown, you're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. Now, this particular model is their DeepTech, guys. And essentially with that, it's their premium flagship model. They essentially put all of the tech, quote unquote, into this watch so that they're able pretty much everything that they can produce, any of the technologies that they have when it comes to fit and finish and capabilities on a watch, they put it all into here. And of course, it is a bit of an homage in the spirit of the Rolex Deep Sea Sea Dweller range, in that it also is a super ultra capable deep sea diver. Now, the retail price on this is $1,100 straight from Raven, and guys, this thing is an absolute beast. It's a monster. It's also happens to be quite handsome. So I think that's one of the main things to kind of get out of the way. This is a larger watch. But you know what? It's not large for the sake of being large. It's actually large for the sake of function. This thing, has a depth rating, guys, that the human body can't withstand. Right? It's 2,500 meters. That's pretty legit. And of course, guys, we've reviewed tons of different watches here on the channel, many that have been larger than this watch. It's actually quite diminutive considering the depth rating that it can go to. But I mean, I've had 1,000 meter divers on this channel. I've had 600 meter divers on this channel that are quite larger than this. So with all that said, let's actually go ahead and take a closer look. Okay, so one of the things that you're gonna have to know about this piece, just by looking at it off the bat, it has really great proportions, right? And proportions are different than scale. Scale is the size. The proportions, though, are the way that the size of each component to kind of work together to make a cohesive design. And man, this thing is quite a looker, guys. Absolutely gorgeous. But if you take a look here, of course, it's a larger watch, guys. This is not something that you might want to buy as a gift for your adolescent preteen son, because he will get quite an arm workout with this bad boy. But you know what? For us grown-ups, this thing is absolute butter. Wow. Yeah, supremely impressed with this one. So surprisingly, the case width is only 42.5, which is pretty nuts considering really how large it is. I mean, honestly, if they probably would have made it larger, it might have seemed it might help to thin out the case. But you know what? That's a question for a lot of people who want these, really high spec, deep diving sports watches. Is they don't always want them to be really wide in diameter. Sometimes they want something that's very wearable. And if you look at this, even the way that they did the end links, this thing's pretty wearable. You guys can see there that those end links don't add any additional length to that lug to lug. So it is 17 millimeters thick, which honestly, I mean, there's chronographs that are in that range or much thicker, honestly. So it's not like it's some unwearable thickness. The lug width is 52 millimeters, so not the longest lug width, but not the shortest by any means. Not super compact, but when you consider kind of the package here, I think it's the right size, and then the whole thing is just fully brushed, and then it does offer some really nice high polished accents here that you're going to find on, of course, the integrated helium escape valve, also polished accents all around this bezel, and then the crown. But everything else is pretty much brushed, which I think bring the overall aesthetic. It's a tool piece. This thing is a tool diver, no nonsense, and is really, I think kind of a distilled take on what a dive watch is. It's not throwing in a lot of frills. The only thing that it throws in is capability, right? And being able to dive so deep. The Sapphire is a single dome with a inner AR coating, and it's 4.5 millimeters thick, guys. So quite thick there. And then, of course, at the harsher angle, since it's a single dome, you are going to get a little bit of a distortion and kind of some visual play and interest as you look at it. And you can see there goes the AR coating, which I think it does a really nice job of negotiating these studio lights right now. Of course, directly on, it's always going to be tough, near impossible. But when you look at it here, really, really nice. And one thing that you probably might not even have picked up on is that this actually is a big date model, guys. Really, really enjoying that. But before we get into that, let's actually get some bezel action on here. Ooh. Very precise bezel. Nice notches. Of course, I'm wearing gloves, so it's not always the easiest thing for me to grasp these guys, especially, for this model. Oh, man, that's nice. Is that lined up perfectly? Nope. One more. So 120 click, unidirectional, really quite nice. I love the touch points on this watch. The crown, when I had to wind it up to get it going for the video. Really a pleasure. As you can see, it's quite large. It has a great diameter on it, so you get a lot of nice grip and whatnot. And man, this thing is just a looker, guys. It just has a simple look, and a lot of these deep dive watches these days, honestly, are quite loud in a lot of ways. And as far as the colors go, there's kind of a race to be different, but it doesn't necessarily mean better, right? So there's a lot of brands that are out there that are really trying very hard to not look like anything else out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it looks like anything that you want. Here, the Raven, of course, is playing with a couple of different design elements of the past, but you know what? It does it in a way, I think, that is still really quite handsome and a desirable look, to say the least. That sapphire bezel insert's really nice, fully loomed. So from a functional standpoint, really great for visibility. Then you even have the large date, which is great because so now you can kind of avoid needing any type of magnifier on the lens, so it's a lot clearer and cleaner. There also are no date options, but I think with this ETA 2826 big date movement, you might as well get the date, guys, because it's such a cool thing that a lot of people would overlook is that big date wheel there. You can see how large the font is, very, very readable, and that's how big it looks on a watch that's quite big. So I mean, this is really, really nice from that standpoint. I'm really enjoying that, and it's just little details and thoughtfulness like that I truly enjoy. As far as the indices and everything go, of course, everything is printed. It's onto a matte black dial. The hands are polished, and this does use a ton of BGW9 Superluminova. Now, the water resistance, like I mentioned, is 2,500 meters of water resistance, so 2,500. Of course, you're going to have a solid case back there with some nice etching. Really beautiful. The lugs are drilled, as you can see, and this is a 22 millimeter lug width, and it does taper down very, very nicely to 18 millimeters on the link, and then a 20 millimeter ratcheting clasp. That actually, again, another nice surprise, guys, is it has usable micro adjust holes because of the scale used for the links. So not an afterthought, actual, you know, planning and execution there. So really nice, because there's a lot of times you'll see, you know, other brands might use this clasp, but you can't really use the micro adjust holes because of the style of link on the bracelet. Here, very beautiful fit. You can see great articulation, and you can actually use the micro adjust holes to help dial this in to get the perfect wear for you. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get this piece on wrist. Okay, now as you guys can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this thing actually wears pretty darn nice, guys. You know, of course it does have some height on it. You take a look there, but look at that beautiful taper there. And then of course you got the milled clasp, which does help anchor this beast on the wrist. It's actually not as top heavy as you'd expect. You know, it really scratches that overbuilt chunky diver itch really quite perfectly. As far as model variations go, guys, there's tons of different ones that are out there for this piece, but I think this model of the black with the big date is really kind of the, I think, the ideal spec. You know, of course, different colors are always nice, but one, I love this big date complication, and two, I think the black and steel look just suits this watch absolutely perfectly. As you can see here from this angle, you know, there's some height there, you know, but that's a lot of bezel height. And then the case sides are more of the side slab case design, but you know what, it's still quite a clean design, and because of that rounded case back, it does keep it up off the wrist enough to where you can get really great articulation for those of you that do enjoy wearing your bracelets a little bit looser and a little bit lower on the wrist, more towards the hand. As you can see, I still get great articulation from that standpoint. And if I need to, of course, I could ratchet adjust and give myself a little bit of extra length if, you know, there's anything going on. There's a heat wave or something and my wrist starts swelling. So really fantastic on the wrist, guys, and a bit unexpected, honestly, how nicely this thing fits. And some of you are probably thinking, oh man, that's a huge watch, just by looking at it. But you know, this is not really meant to be kind of, I mean, at least in my eyes, this is not trying to fill the shoes of some type of ultra versatile everyday timepiece. This is a statement piece. This thing's got pizzazz, guys. So really, oh man, I just love seeing the light roll off of that brushing there. Really finely done, really nicely executed. Let's go ahead and set up some loom shots and low light transition. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. Whoa. As you guys can see, that BGW9 is just pumping away. Really, really gorgeous. You know, just like you'd expect. This thing is a deep, deep diver, and the deeper you go with this, it still remains really, really quite legible. Now, one thing I do like to also do in these loom shots is set up my low light transition, because you're not always going to be looking at your watch and wearing it in direct sunlight. So it's nice to kind of see in you know, less than optimal lighting conditions, or even harsh lighting conditions, like you're going to see right here, kind of what this is going to render like, and also, of course, take a look at the way the light plays off of the case itself. But as you can see here, look at that transitional, when you go from kind of that dark to light situation, still ultra legible. That's what I really always look for, because sometimes design-wise, you can get something that does pack quite a visual punch, but isn't necessarily super legible in between kind of lighting changes and whatnot. Here, even though you do have you know, quite a few glossy elements with that beautiful sapphire bezel insert, it still renders really, really super legible and very readable. Very, very deep black there. And then on the dial, when you get a little bit harsher, you can kind of see some of that matted texture to it, but it still never quite lights up, which is really nice. It still stays quite a deep black, inky kind of color there. Really beautiful. Look at the way the light rolls right off those lugs, the brushing and whatnot, how everything just comes together and just meets really, really well. Okay, guys. So, on the wrist again, just to kind of have some closing thoughts here. Not quite as top heavy as you'd expect, guys. I was really surprised by this one. I mean, obviously, I love the looks of it. There's a lot of people that are going to be like, man, if this thing was, 300 meters water resistance and 12 millimeters thick, it'd be the perfect watch for me, whatnot. Raven, they have watches like that. They have those kind of everyday, sensible divers. This is not that, right? This is definitely something very, very special. Now, as far as model variations go, yeah, there's tons of variations. Dial colors. You can also get stainless steel bezel inserts. Definitely check for availability in the description below. I'll leave a link. Then there's also, you have the big date and you have no date option, which is great for those of you that want that kind of ultimate symmetry of dial. But I'm definitely a big fan of this big date complication. Now, as far as comparable models go, guys, there are, these ultra deep divers, they tend to kind of go either way, up or down the food chain. You either have the really super high end stuff, or you have the real budget stuff, to where that's kind of like the whole purpose of it, is that it's just a big, chunky, deep diving watch. And of course, it's not easy to get them to 2,500 meters of water resistance. Typically, you'll find those, in the 500 to 1,000 range as far as the depth rating goes. And you can find some fairly cheap ones that are quite large and chunky that can go, deeper than you'd ever need to and whatnot. And that's kind of part of their whole aesthetic. I think what's nice about this watch is it kind of hits a bit of a sweet spot, because it's relatively higher end, but still at a very attainable price point, guys. $1,100. This is finished very nicely, and even if it didn't have its size or its depth rating, I'd still be pretty impressed. And this, as far as the build quality goes, I'd say it's comparable to something like an Oris or whatnot. Of course, for you to get anything that dives that deep out of Oris, you'd probably be paying a lot more money, if they even offer anything that goes this deep. Let me know in the comments below. This is a really impressive timepiece, and I really think, again, it's a lot like a modern hypercar, right? There's some cars that are just obsessed with top speed and going 200 plus miles an hour. Is that for everybody? No, but the DeepTech is really an exercise in excess, much like supercars and hypercars of today, putting up those big numbers for those who celebrate maxed out specs. And here, guys, the specs are pushed to the absolute max. And when you think about it, the fact that you can fit this on your wrist, in itself is a feat, and something to really be admired. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.